Hi and welcome to this SodaCube video tutorial. My name's Dan Cormick and today I'm going to show you how to create this fire effect in Unity. It's using a single 1024 texture atlas. Okay, this is our footage of the fire. It's not currently looping, so the first thing we're going to do is make it loop. And I'll be doing that in 3D Studio Max. The first step is to create a plane for us to apply the footage to. I'm just going to use a standard material. I'll call it Fire 01. I'll create another material over here and call it Fire 02. And we'll need another one which we'll call Fire Loop. So just in that first one there, I will select our footage source and assign it to the plane. And to avoid any shading occurring during the render, I'm going to put the self-illumination value up to 100%. And I'm going to remove the distortion in the UVs by applying a UV map modifier and selecting bitmap fit and selecting our source MPEG again. And I'll just collapse the stack on that once I've done that. The next thing I'm going to do is duplicate that plane and position it to the front of the first one. I'll also duplicate the material and I'll rename that to 02 again. Then I'm going to go into the diffuse map settings and go down to the time rollout and set that to -64. I'll make sure I've applied that material to our object and just replace. Click replace. I'll also want to set my time slider to 64 frames. This way you can see the frame at frame 64 on that plane at the back is identical to the frame at frame 0 on the plane at the front. Because we've got our frame set to 64, we're going to end up with a duplicate. The frame, like I was saying, is the same. So we need to actually set this to 63. So I'll do that there. And I also want to change my render aspect to 128 by 128. So I'll just display the safe frame and change my render output settings to an aspect of 128 by 128. I'll also select for when we're rendering our active time segment. I'm going to save this file as an uncompressed AVI. Just make sure it's uncompressed there so you don't get any data loss. Let's save. And then I'm going to position this as tightly as possible in the safe frame. And I'll just scrub through on the time slider to make sure none of the flames are popping out of frame. And that looks pretty good. So inside of our material, Fire 02, which is assigned to the plane at the front, we want to animate the opacity from 100% down to 0%. So I'll just click Auto key and I'll set the opacity to 0. Doesn't matter where you do this, but you probably want about 4 or 5 frames. And then I'll set that to 100 and delete that auto key that was generated there at the start. So now we've got it fading over 4 or 5 frames. And the trick here is to select a point in the footage that will allow these two planes to blend quite nicely. So you're looking for frames that are somewhat identical in the direction the flame's moving and the size. Otherwise there will be too much of a noticeable jump. So that looks not too bad. That's pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. So once you've done that, just hit render to output to the AVI. Okay, so now that we've got that new footage, we'll select our fire loop material and apply the uncompressed AVI we've just rendered. We'll need a third plane here, and we'll assign that. You can see that it's come up quite stretched. That's because of what we did with the mapping previously, so we're going to do that again. Another UV map modifier, bitmap fit, and this time select the AVI. And I'll just collapse that again. I'm also going to hide the other two planes, so we're just looking at this new footage that we've created. And again, I'll put the self-illumination up to 100%. This time we want to duplicate the diffuse map and paste it into the opacity slot. This will give us an alpha channel. And we'll also want to change our render settings to output to single PNGs. I've already got some there, so I'll just hit save over that. When you're saving, you want to make sure that you have alpha channel selected in your setup. And you also want to make sure that you have a color, a background color that is complementary to the palette of your flames, so as you don't get anti-aliasing with a black background. That'll create a fairly harsh dark outline on your final frames. Once that's set up, make sure you have your front viewport selected and hit render again. And you can see here that it's rendering it with an alpha, which is exactly what we're after. Okay, so that's finished rendering, and we can see all the frames that we've had output here. And I'm going to take it into Photoshop now and import these using a built-in script that comes with Photoshop called load files into stack. So we'll browse for our frames, select them all, okay, and then hit OK again, and you'll see that this is automatically loading each one of those frames into a layer. Okay, once they've come in and loaded into the single PSD, the frames are actually going to end up being back to front. So the first thing we need to do is select all of your layers. If you were to run the next script that I'll show in a minute, your flames would be animated backwards and it looks a little odd. So select all of them, go to your layer menu, drop down, and the arrange menu, and then just click on reverse. The next step is to run a script that I got from, I have the link here, a layers to Sprite script that was written by McCoy, and I got that from the Talk Powered forums. And if you follow the instructions in those forums, it'll step you through how to implement that script. So I've got it here. I'm just going to run that on our PSD, and it's automatically going to create the 1024 atlas for us. Okay, so within a few seconds, we have our flames laid out on a billboard for us. We can actually just take that and save it as a PNG and then import it into Unity here. And we'll replace the current one that we've got. And just have a quick look. So you can see there's a bit of a jump in there that might just take a little bit of playing around with. To get this actually playing in Unity, we'll need a couple of other scripts. The first one is the one that's written by Joachim Ante. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that right. But these ones, this one's from the Unify Community Wiki, and the other one that we've got that we're using is from the Unity Forums. And the animate UV array script looks like this. You may need to change, well, you will need to change the values set here and here. Our Billboard is using an 8x8 array on the 1024 Atlas, and our source footage was 30 frames a second. So if you want the playback to be as realistic as possible, you'll want to match that frames per second with your source footage. And then it's just a matter of dragging and dropping that onto your Fire Billboard. And the other script that we've got here is a straightforward script that's come from the Unity Forums. It basically just tells that plane to continually look at the camera that's in the scene. And you can see here, if I move this camera, that billboard rotates, and it's quite an effective effect. So that's how you create a fire effect in Unity, using all the fantastic tools that have been created out there by the community. Thanks for listening.